The flag waving in space, a sign of staging. One of the most well-known claims by moon landing deniers is that the American flag planted by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin appears to be waving, despite the fact that there's no atmosphere or wind on the moon. In the footage, the flag ripples and moves as if it's being blown by the wind, which has led many to believe that the footage was staged on Earth in a studio with artificial wind. However, NASA has provided a logical explanation. The flag had a horizontal rod sewn into it to keep it extended, but when the astronauts twisted the pole into the lunar surface, it caused a ripple effect. The moon's low gravity also allows objects to move differently than they would on Earth, meaning the flag continued to sway for a brief time due to inertia. Skeptics, however, argue that the waving effect is too unnatural for simple inertia. They believe that NASA faked the entire moon landing on a Hollywood-style set, possibly directed by Stanley Kubrick, the acclaimed filmmaker behind 2001, A Space Odyssey. So, is this just a simple physics misunderstanding or evidence of a massive hoax? The Van Allen radiation belt. Could astronauts have survived? A major argument against the moon landing is that astronauts would not have been able to survive the intense radiation of the Van Allen belts. These radiation belts, located between 600 and 60,000 kilometers above Earth, contain deadly levels of radiation that should have been lethal to anyone passing through them. Conspiracy theorists argue that Apollo astronauts would have been exposed to extreme radiation levels, leading to sickness or even death. They claim that the technology in the 1960s was not advanced enough to protect them, proving that the mission must have been faked. NASA, however, states that the Apollo spacecraft moved through the belts very quickly, spending only about an hour in the radiation zone, which limited exposure. Additionally, the spacecraft's aluminum shielding provided some protection, ensuring that radiation doses remained within safe levels. While modern astronauts still take radiation precautions, skeptics continue to question whether NASA downplayed the true dangers of the Van Allen belts. Was the Apollo mission just lucky, or is there something NASA isn't telling us? No stars in the moon landing photos, a major oversight. One of the most frequently cited arguments by moon landing deniers is that there are no stars visible in any of the photos taken on the lunar surface, given that the moon has no atmosphere. Many argue that stars should have been visible, making their absence highly suspicious. NASA explains that the lack of stars is due to camera exposure settings. The astronauts' cameras were set to capture the brightly lit lunar surface, meaning dim stars did not appear in the images. This is the same reason why, if you take a photo in a well-lit city at night, you might not capture any stars. Skeptics argue that this is too convenient of an explanation. They believe that the lack of stars proves that the photos were taken in a studio, where NASA forgot to add a star-filled background. But if the moon landing were fake, wouldn't NASA have anticipated this criticism and included stars in the background? So, is this a simple photographic issue, or did NASA overlook a crucial detail when staging the moon landing? The odd shadows and lighting. Evidence of studio lights. One of the most puzzling aspects of the Apollo moon landing footage is the strange shadows and lighting inconsistencies. In several images, shadows appear to be cast in multiple directions, which critics argue suggests the use of artificial lighting, like those found on a movie set. If the only light source on the moon is the sun, then shouldn't all shadows be parallel? Skeptics believe that this proves the moon landing was filmed on a soundstage with multiple light sources. Some theorists even suggest that Stanley Kubrick, who directed 2001, A Space Odyssey, was secretly recruited to stage the footage using Hollywood special effects. NASA, however, has a scientific explanation. The moon's surface is uneven and highly reflective, meaning that shadows can appear distorted based on the terrain. Additionally, light from the sun reflects off the lunar dust, which can cause unexpected brightness and shadow angles. Photographers also point out that wide-angle camera lenses can distort perspectives, making shadows appear misleading. Still, conspiracy theorists argue that NASA's explanation doesn't hold up under scrutiny. They claim that many of the photos seem artificially lit, and some even suggest that hidden wires and backdrops were used. So did NASA send astronauts to the moon, or did they just send us clever illusions? The rock with the C marking. a stage prop. One of the strangest pieces of evidence supporting the moon landing hoax theory is a photo showing a rock with the letter C clearly imprinted on it. Many believe this is a set prop marker, meaning the entire moon landing was filmed on a soundstage using props labeled for placement. Critics argue that this is undeniable proof that the landing was staged. After all, why would a perfectly carved letter appear on a natural moon rock? They believe that someone forgot to turn the rock around, accidentally exposing a studio marker meant for set designers. NASA, however, denies this claim. According to them, the C marking is just a photographic anomaly, likely caused by a hair or fiber that accidentally got onto the image when it was developed. Later versions of the same photo do not show the marking, supporting NASA's claim that it was an error, not a real engraving. Still, skeptics argue that this is too much of a coincidence. Could it really be just a fluke, or was this an embarrassing mistake by a careless stagehand on a fake set? The lunar module's missing crater. Where's the impact? When Apollo astronauts landed on the moon, their lunar module used a powerful descent engine to slow down before touchdown. Skeptics argue that such a forceful landing should have created a massive crater beneath the spacecraft. However, in all available photos, the ground beneath the lunar module appears undisturbed, almost as if it was simply placed there rather than landing with full force. Conspiracy theorists claim that this proves the landing was faked. After all, shouldn't there be burn marks or a blast crater under the lander? They argue that this is evidence that the entire mission was filmed on a set, where the lunar module was lowered into position by cables rather than actually landing on a dusty surface. NASA, however, says this is a misunderstanding of physics. The moon's low gravity means that the lander didn't need as much thrust to slow down, resulting in a gentle landing. Additionally, the moon's surface is very compact and rocky, which would not produce a dramatic crater the way loose Earth soil would. Still, many people believe that the lack of impact evidence is highly suspicious. So, did the Apollo astronauts truly land gently, or did they never land at all? The unchanged technology. If we did it then, why not now? One of the biggest questions that fuels moon landing conspiracy theories is, if we landed on the moon in 1969 with 1960s technology, why haven't we gone back in recent decades? Critics argue that we should have returned multiple times or even established a moon base by now. If technology has advanced so much, why has NASA never repeated the achievement on the same scale? Conspiracy theorists suggest that the moon landing was staged because NASA knew they could never do it again. Some even claim that NASA lost the original moon landing technology, which they find suspicious. After all, why would the greatest achievement in human history be so difficult to replicate today? NASA explains that the Apollo program was shut down due to budget cuts and shifting priorities. While new missions like Artemis aim to return humans to the moon, it has taken decades to develop new technology and gather funding. Additionally, NASA argues that deep space exploration is far more complex than just launching astronauts again. Still, skeptics remain unconvinced. If we truly landed on the moon over 50 years ago, why haven't we built on that success? Did we really go, or was it all just Cold War propaganda? The astronauts' strange behavior. Were they hiding something? Another peculiar aspect of the moon landing controversy is the odd behavior of the Apollo 11 astronauts during interviews. When they returned from their mission, they seemed unusually reserved, nervous, and even reluctant to talk about their experience. Some conspiracy theorists claim that their body language indicates they were hiding something. One famous example is the press conference held by Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins after their return. Rather than displaying excitement and pride, the astronauts appeared anxious, hesitant, and even guilty. Skeptics argue that they were under pressure from NASA to keep a huge secret, that they never actually went to the moon. However, defenders of NASA argue that the astronauts were simply exhausted from their long and intense journey. They had just made history, and the overwhelming public attention might have made them feel uncomfortable or pressured. Additionally, military-style debriefings might have restricted their responses. Regardless, the astronauts' awkward demeanor continues to fuel suspicions. If they really walked on the moon, why didn't they show more enthusiasm? Could it be that they knew the whole mission was fake? The Soviet Union never challenged the moon landing. One of the strongest arguments against the moon landing hoax theory is the fact that the Soviet Union never disputed it. During the Cold War, the US and the USSR were bitter rivals, locked in a space race to prove their technological superiority. If NASA had faked the moon landing, wouldn't the Soviets have exposed them? Skeptics argue that the Soviet Union may have had its own reasons for staying silent. Some claim that the two superpowers struck a secret deal, while others believe that the USSR simply didn't have the evidence to challenge NASA publicly. NASA, however, argues that Soviet scientists tracked the Apollo missions and confirmed the landings. The Soviets had advanced space technology and could have easily detected a fake, yet they never raised doubts. This suggests that the landings were real. Still, some theorists believe that global politics played a role in maintaining the moon landing story. Could it be that even the Cold War rivals had reasons to keep the truth hidden? The missing Apollo 11 tapes, a cover-up. One of the most baffling aspects of the moon landing controversy is that NASA lost the original Apollo 11 video recordings. The footage of one of humanity's greatest achievements is nowhere to be found, and critics argue that this is highly suspicious. How could NASA, an organization that meticulously records and archives data, misplace such important tapes? In 2006, NASA admitted that the original high-quality telemetry tapes of the Apollo 11 moon landing were erased or recorded over. According to their explanation, this happened during a period of tape shortages in the 1980s. Skeptics, however, believe this is a blatant cover-up. They argue that NASA intentionally destroyed the evidence because the tapes contained proof that the landing was staged. Some even suggest that NASA never had real footage from the moon to begin with, and that the missing tapes were a convenient way to avoid further scrutiny. NASA has since attempted to restore and enhance the existing moon landing footage using modern technology, but conspiracy theorists argue that doctored videos only add to the suspicion. If the original tapes really existed, why would NASA fail to preserve them? Could it be that the footage never left Earth? The wagging flag, proof of Earth's gravity. One of the most iconic images from the Apollo moon landing is the American flag planted by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. However, skeptics point to an odd detail. The flag appears to wave and ripple, even though there is no air or wind on the moon. They argue that this is clear evidence that the footage was filmed on Earth, where wind or artificial fans caused the flag to move. NASA explains that the flag wasn't waving in the wind, but rather moving due to the way it was handled. The astronauts twisted and adjusted the flagpole as they planted it into the lunar soil, causing the flag to move. Since the moon lacks an atmosphere, there was no air resistance to stop the movement quickly, making it appear as though the flag continued to wave. Skeptics, however, remain unconvinced. Some claim that the motion looks exactly like a flag moving in Earth's atmosphere, while others argue that a rigid wire inside the flag's fabric should have kept it perfectly still. Did NASA really take this flag to the moon, or was it just another Hollywood-style prop? The reflectors on the moon. Undeniable proof. One of the strongest arguments against the moon landing hoax theory is the existence of retroreflectors, mirror-like devices left on the moon by Apollo astronauts. These reflectors allow scientists to bounce lasers off the moon's surface, providing precise distance measurements. Since they are still in use today, NASA argues that they prove humans went to the moon and left equipment behind. Skeptics, however, counter that retroreflectors could have been placed on the moon by robotic missions, such as the Soviet Luna 17 rover. They argue that no human presence was needed for the reflectors to be installed, and that NASA could have used unmanned missions to place them. Conspiracy theorists claim that even if the reflectors were placed by Apollo astronauts, this doesn't necessarily prove that the moon landing footage was real. Some believe that a real landing might have occurred, but the footage was faked to make the mission appear more dramatic and successful than it actually was. Despite these claims, the laser reflectors remain one of the most solid pieces of evidence supporting the moon landings. If they weren't placed by astronauts, how did they get there? Did humans truly set foot on the moon, or is there another explanation? Truth or hoax? The moon landing debate has fascinated people for decades, and both sides have presented compelling arguments. While NASA insists that all 6 Apollo missions to the moon were real, skeptics continue to question the evidence. From suspicious shadows and missing tapes to scientific rebuttals and undeniable proof, the mystery surrounding the moon landing remains one of the most controversial conspiracy theories in history. So, did we truly land on the moon, or is this the greatest deception ever pulled off? That's for you to decide.